Sure. Okay, y'all, Douglas Cochrane is an avid boater, one of the organizers of the 2020 South Sound Studio Tour, and a whittler with a glass addiction, which he's going to tell us more about. So, Douglas, you are now spotlighted.
Hi, everybody. So, yes, as most of you, or a lot of you know me because we're family, but for everybody else here, welcome too. And I want to introduce my beloved partner and co-captain, Jerry. She has agreed reluctantly to assist me today. She's going to be handling the camera and props, and she's going to give me a quick kick if I carry on too long. So, which is unlikely because I rarely talk very much. So, before we start on the artwork, I'd like to do just a quick update on the studio tour for the artists locally who are, I assume, some of you are signed in here. Nicole ran the studio tour last year and it was a big success. And then this year she decided that she had too many irons in the fire, so she recruited Nellie Voss and Leanne Perry and me as the steering committee to run this thing. And we've had a lot of fun doing it. It's a lot of work. Leanne did the lion's share of the work because she's the registrar and treasurer, which involved a lot of bookkeeping and chasing people back and forth to get everything in on time. We also have some other volunteers that have been a big help. Heather Chard designed our brochure for us. And so this is artwork for all the studios that are going to be in the tour, and then the basic information about it. Then on the other side, we have the detailed information about all the studios and a map that shows where all the studios are. And you'll notice down in the corner, there's a QR code. If you can click on that with your smartphone, and it will load all of those locations into a Google map. So you can set up a route to go to the studios you want to see, and Google will direct you from one to another. So the whole thing folds up like this into a pocket-sized piece, so it will be very handy to carry with you as people go around. This also will be a poster. We can hang this in the window of stores or galleries or whatever as a promotional piece. So thank you to Heather and John Sarembe for doing the brochure. One other person who has done a lot of work, although she kind of got stopped dead in her tracks when Governor Inslee put out his edict, but Sarah Getty is the social media person for us, and she has a whole Facebook campaign planned for this. So all we need is about 6 or 8 weeks of notice when it's safe for us all to gather again, and we're going to put this thing together and invite the community to come and join us. So that'll be fun. So as an artist, I'm strictly an amateur. I don't sell my work. When I was a young man, I tried to become a professional artist, but I wasn't good enough, and I found I didn't enjoy it. I felt like I was always under pressure to keep track of how much time I was put into a piece, or how much it's costing me, or how many I could put out at the time, and the marketing and all that. And at the same time, I was a welder, a steel fabricator, and that was all about efficiency. And how fast can you put it out? Make sure you get a good job quickly. And as an efficiency expert, I thought, if I'm going to have to be under that kind of stress, I'd just as soon make union wages. So that's when I decided not to pursue art as a career, but instead to just do it for my own enjoyment, which has allowed me to focus on where is the wellspring of creativity. And for me, it's what I call my R&D department. The R&D department is typically open from about 2 to 4 a.m. when I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking, it's not really as formal as R&D. It's more like recess. I find I'm laying there awake, so I ring the bell, open all the doors, and all the kids run out of my head and go kick the ball around, or try to make weird faces or stand on their head. Or there's always one part that's over in the sandbox and trying to smooth everything out, draw something perfectly and smooth it out again, draw it again. And that kind of creativity allows me to have everything thought out about 1,000 times before I ever go in the shop and lay hands on whatever I'm going to work on. So the other part of art that I love is it's a learning experience. There's lots of artists that focus on one type of art and they become very, very good at it. You know, they're the experts. I've never been an expert at anything, but I enjoy learning new skills. And it doesn't take much at all to start me off going, okay, let's build something out of this and do it this way, because it looks like it'd be a fun challenge. So that's another piece of art that I really love. Now, you can probably guess from my description of my approach to art that I'm not very productive. I'm probably the least prolific artist you'll ever meet. And the piece I'm going to show you today is my career best. I started it in 1971. I built a little stained glass window, and it was a pretty blonde girl sitting under a tree, gazing pensively off into the distance, waiting for her artist to come and make her reel. And I mean, it was a young man's dream, and I was a young man. It was a fun little piece. One of my daughters still has it in her home. Well, a couple of years later, I was looking through a book of Alphonse Mucha posters. Mucha was a artist around the early 1900s who did all kinds of very fanciful posters. His biggest claim to fame was he did the posters for Sarah Bernhardt, a famous actress in those days. And so I was looking through this book, and I found one of his drawings that was very similar to what I had created before. And so I thought it would be fun to try to do that. So amazingly, not only does the book still exist, but my dear friend Joe O'Leary had it and was able to find it after all these years. But here's what the inspiration was for this piece. It's not a young girl, but it's a beautiful young woman, again, staring off into the distance. So at that time, what I did then is I drew this. So this was the drawing that I made inspired by the Mucha piece, and I was originally planning to do this in leaded glass. That's the technique I was most interested in at that time. And I had some decisions to make, of course, of was it going to be a window, or was it going to be a wall hanging, or was it going to be a freestanding piece like a stand-up mirror that would go in a room, something like that. You can see that the shape of it doesn't lend itself to a window, but it's certainly a possibility. And then also I had to make a decision about glass, because glass itself has two kinds of ways to approach itself. One is you shine light through it and you see all the beautiful features of the glass in the glass. The other approach is shine light on the glass and you see the surface of it, and that gives you again a very beautiful appearance, but it's quite different than what a window would be. So I was leaving this to my R&D department for a long time. You know, how do we do this? How do we make it strong? At first I thought I would probably make a steel ring that went all the way around the thing, and that would give me the structural strength that needed to be a wall hanging or a freestanding piece. But it didn't appeal to me, because to have a beautiful, delicate woman wrapped up in a big steel cage, this didn't seem like it was ideal. So I put the drawing away, and somehow it has survived with me for over 40 years. And a few years ago, I decided if I was ever going to make this thing, it should probably get started. So as I say, Joe O'Leary found the book, and I was able to get the colors and things and start thinking seriously about how it worked. So let me show you what the end result was here. Jerry's going to turn the camera around here, and I'm going to unveil. So this is our lady.
Super cool.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful.
So it's mixed wood and glass, is that what I'm seeing?
Yes, it's a mixed media.
Mhm.
Okay, now we're going to turn the camera back around so I can wave my arms too.
Oh, there's a sailboat.
I see.
So as you can see, the design has evolved over the years. For one thing, it's no longer a beautiful young girl. I'm not a young man. I have great respect and admiration for older women. So you can see the gray hair, and also I chose to make her a Hispanic girl, a woman, instead of a little white girl, because we spent a lot of time in Latin America. I really admired the Hispanic culture, and also part of our family is Hispanic, so it makes sense to do that.
Wow.
So as I got into it, part of what interested me here was different techniques. And one of the techniques that I've wanted to play with for a long time was the idea of steam bent wood. And in order to give this piece some structure, some strength, I decided to make these rings, and that was the first piece that I'm going to make here. So let me show you just what I'm going to do is kind of give you a thumbnail sketch of some of the techniques. If anybody's interested in learning more about it, this will give you at least a hint of what it takes to do it. So in this case, what I had here is a tin bucket. This was my steam chamber for steaming wood. I filled it half full of water and put it on a big butane burner, and it boiled the water and made steam. And then the steam came out of the top down a flexible hose over to my job. The wood itself I put in this. This is comes on a roll, but it's sort of like an endless baggie. So I could slip a long piece of wood. This wood here was about 6 or 7 feet long. I slip it in there. The advantage of this is that it was a small chamber. This was basically flattened down, and I didn't have to have a great big area like a big steam box full of steam. All I had to do is fill this. And also this could stay on the wood while I bent it.
Mm.
How thick was the wood?
This wood is, this is 1/2 inch thick. This is 3/8 thick. So it's pretty heavy. I had to build a jig that I used a big heavy piece of plywood and screwed a bunch of 2x4 blocks around in a circle. And then I had a dozen or more clamps, big pipe
You had it
clamps
hooked up to
and
the car.
smaller ones.
The trailer hitch on the car.
Yeah,
to hold it still.
in order to keep the whole thing in one place, I didn't have anything I could bolt to the earth, so we chained the table to the car so that I could pull real hard without the table rolling across the driveway. So Jerry was quite convinced I was going to kill myself in the process. But we survived. Oh, the one thing I didn't show you is that the bucket itself is badly damaged. So here's a hot tip.
It was a little fire.
Don't let the thing run out of water right in the middle of your most important bend.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Hi, Lynette. How long did that take you?
The steam bending?
Uh-huh.
Well, it took me several weeks to succeed. The actual bend, when you get a piece hot enough to bend, you only have about maybe 10 or 15 minutes before the wood loses its flexibility. So it's a matter of moving pretty fast. Once you pull it out of the kiln or out of the steamer and start bending it, you've got to go quickly.
And we had 3 people there, sometimes 4, and we were moving as fast as we could, and we had a lot of failures.
Yeah, I have a number of failures that I want to get back into it again sometime, because it is a real interesting thing to do. But next time I'm going to go a little lighter. This is pretty heavy stuff, and it took all the strength we had and big heavy clamps and things to try to get it in shape. The wood itself is special because you can't bend wood that's been kiln dried. The kiln drying takes all the flexibility out of the wood, so I had to find a local sawmill that could provide me with some nice oak boards to work with. So moving on, the rest of the wood in this is alder. Alder is a really pretty wood. It's got nice grain structure. It's also soft and easy to work with. And I had a lot left over because I trimmed out all the millwork in our beach house with alder. And so this was basically what was left from that project. So the body itself would be easy for an artist. I'm not a very good artist, so I struggled with it a lot. But I ended up carving a lot and then using a disc sander to shape it in a bit. But during the big snowstorm 2 winters ago, we were snowed in, we couldn't get out, so we had the nicest time. It was sort of like now when we were housebound and just the 2 of us and having fun. So Jerry was sitting by the fire weaving her beautiful baskets, and I started whittling. So I took little chunks of alder out of my scrap bin and drew what looked like a leaf and started whittling, and over time I did a whole bunch of leaves. Boy and his buck knife will never be bored. So over the next several months, I carried a little chunk of wood in my pocket most of the time, and anytime I had a few minutes with nothing to do, I would pull out my buck knife and whittle. And so that's where all of these leaves came from. I wasn't sure how I was going to use them when I was making them, but I figured if I got enough of them, something would work. Then I noticed that in the old Mucha design that I was inspired by, there was this fancy lattice work, and a fellow I know has a CNC router, and he offered to make me something fancy, but I couldn't do that because the whole thing was hand created. So I ended up hand whittling all of this fretwork behind here too.
Are they, is it one piece or many pieces?
Well, for strength, I had to put in 2 bars between the rings for structural strength. And so there's 3 pieces. There's one that goes from here, one in the middle, and one down this.
Oh, cool. Fun.
So that was fun and time consuming. I mean, every one of these leaves took hours. Some of them took days, the fancy one. But it's lovely. Art is a form of meditation for me. If I can keep my hands busy creating something, and my whole focus is just on my hands, then my mind can go off to beautiful places and just rest and just enjoy being here now, being in the moment. So, so that was really special to just do that. In fact, I've got another piece now I'm whittling. It's going to take 1,000 hours to finish it, but it's fun. So then I came down to the question of glass, because remember, this was going to be a glass piece, and I had done a smaller piece, a fish mounted in wood, kind of as a beta test for this, and what I found was I was using a copper foil technique, and it kind of hid the glass a bit. So let me talk about different ways of putting glass together. There's leaded glass. That's the traditional way that they use, like in the big cathedrals and things. So this is a piece of leaded glass that's an H shape. So you can put a piece of glass in each side. And then this is one that's a C shape. So it will wrap around the outside. So if we take two pieces of glass and put them together in the channels, see, they just slip into those channels of the lead, and then there'd be another piece of lead comes across this here, and we would solder the pieces together. That's how leaded glass is put together. So we use a soldering iron with a good hefty tip and solder. And before we solder it, we treat it with a flux to clean it. So I'm giving like a thumbnail sketch of how to do this kind of stuff. I'm happy to share more later if anybody's interested. Now there's another technique called copper foil. So with copper foil, you take a piece of copper foil, it's like tin foil, it's very thin, and it's sticky on one side, and you wrap that around a piece of glass. So this is a piece of glass, and the foil is wrapped around it, and then we squeeze the edges over like this to make a little C channel, and then you lay another piece of glass that's wrapped up against it and run a solder joint over the two of them, and it makes what's called a copper foil leaded glass window. So I've got an example of that here. So this is something I just put together. So you can see that these leaves have copper foil around them. That's the first step, that one and this one. And then this one, you can see I've soldered. I just ran the soldering iron over it with a little bit of solder on the iron, and it just spreads all over everything. And I soldered the joint to put everything together here. And then, so when it's all soldered together, oops, let me get the camera here, it's all shiny silver. And then I treated that with a copper sulfate solution, which puts a patina on it. So it makes it look old. You can leave it shiny silver, but it tarnishes pretty fast, where the copper sulfate will last for years and years. So that's two techniques to work with in glass. And I was planning on this piece. By the time I started building it, I wanted to make it more three-dimensional, more of a bas relief rather than just a flat piece. And so I was thinking I'd use copper foil and kind of stack it up and mold it. But the trouble is that it kind of dominates the glass, and I wanted the glass to be the primary element. So the aha moment for me was I was up at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma and having lunch in the cafe, and there happened to be one of the technicians from the hot shop there was eating at the next table, and I got to chatting with him and told him what I was thinking about doing, and he said, well, why don't you think about doing it in slumped glass? Now, I had no idea what slumped glass was, so I did my best to say, well, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I should think about that. And then as soon as he left, I got my phone out and started Googling slumped glass. Slumped glass, or kiln formed glass, is you take glass and you heat it in a kiln and till it gets soft and will mold into some form. So you have to make a mold for it to form over, and you can get it to do things like this, where it's all beautifully curved around or wavy on her skirt, that sort of thing. So it's not easy. It's a complicated process, but it's a lot of fun. So I started making molds, and the first mold I made out of what's called kiln paper. Now this is it's sort of like cardboard, but it's made of it's not asbestos, but something like it. It can withstand the heat of the kiln. So for her hair, I actually built a complete cardboard model of her, and then I started laying the glass on this kiln paper model and fitting it around. And I didn't have much hope that it would actually work, but it actually came out pretty good. It fit well on her head. We had to do a little grinding on her brain, but you know, that who needs a brain in there? So this all came out nicely. Now, making the mold for this part was I used a much different technique. I built a big slab of plaster of Paris. And so it was a two-step process. First I cut all the glass and fitted it together on my glass table and took that to the kiln and cooked it, and it fused together. So instead of being a bunch of pieces of glass, it was now one piece of glass with all the different beautiful colors in it. And then the second step was to make this mold and place that sheet of multicolored glass on it and heat that until it slumped into the form. So this part of the job is actually two pieces of glass. There's one here that goes behind her foot, and then there's one here that goes in front of her foot and had to go over the body and shape in. Then the third step was I had to take it back to the kiln in a much fancier mold to cook the two pieces together. So I had to heat them up until they fused together and made one piece of glass. Now, I couldn't have done this if it wasn't for Karen Milton. She has a studio down in Rochester called Karen Stained Glass. She does classes and all these different techniques. If you want to learn more about this, that's a great resource. She is very knowledgeable and a delightful person to work with. But she also is very good at the temperatures, because all of these temperatures are very critical. If you don't take it up fast, hot enough, it won't melt. If you take it too hot, it will melt completely and turn into a liquid. So for example, this is a piece here that I made that failed. It was a nice piece. It actually was better glass than what I ended up with, because I was running short of glass, but the surface of it got all bubbled. It calcifies if you don't get your heats quite right. And so I goofed that one up. But Karen was a great resource to help me get all this right. You have to heat the glass up to the right temperature, then you have to very slowly cool it back down so that it doesn't crack. And so when we did the last step on this big piece, which was hours and hours of work by this time and weeks of work, she called me and said it broke. And so I went down with tears in my eyes and collected the remnants. There was two pieces, and brought it home and set it on the table and started realizing that the art was doing itself. And this is something that I used to fight this all the time. You know, the art will do what I say it will do, and that's what it's going to be. But sometimes art makes itself, and sometimes that's better. So, but in this case, the break was this line right here. Now, I couldn't just put the two pieces together because they didn't match, but I found that I could put the lower piece just behind the glass, overlap it by a half an inch or so, and epoxy that together, and it actually improved the glass. It looks like that's a line in the fabric that belongs there. So I was very, very pleased with that. But the assembly part was real tricky because there's parts that had to be there in order to fit other parts, and yet it's all very fragile, especially during the construction part. So it was a real trick figuring out how to put this thing together, and I'd have to turn it over and work on the backside and then turn it up. It was complicated. But I had a great deal of fun with that part of it because it was like it was all coming together finally for me. So, and the other thing I had to do is beef it up, because this is very heavy. All this glass is very heavy, and yet the structure is this ring. So I had to add some more structure in behind to make it strong enough. Now, the last time I did a project like this, so the last time I did a complicated piece of glass, every time I moved it, it broke. So in this case, I built this wooden box, which is all padded inside, perfectly fit to the piece, so I can carefully set it in there, put the lid on, and ship it around, and presumably it'll survive. That's the hope. I want to I want to preserve this beyond my lifespan, and so by making it possible to move it in a reasonable way, it seemed like a good idea. So.
Doug, do you have time to show us the close-up again? Because I now have an appreciation for materials.
Okay, so here's the overall piece, and let me just go in and show you the glass. We melted the glass a little more than we maybe should have, but it worked out nicely
On the hair.
on the hair here.
Skirt's perfect.
Yeah, see how that is, but it's very three-dimensional. Let me show you. See how, so I had to shape it over her forehead and over her shoulder. So that was a fun trick. The hardest piece of all to make was this sash. I loved the way the hands came out, but the sash was very tricky to get it to work because I had to have everything else made before I could even make the mold for that. And so the mold for that, well, let me see here. Hang on a second.
Hey, Douglas.
Yes.
This is Jeff. Are you referring to the beautiful, long, dark, magenta piece as the sash?
Yes. Yeah, this is her. She's holding this ribbon or whatever it is.
Okay.
Here. Yeah. Great to see you, Jeff. So then the skirt, as I say, was made of several pieces. And again, it's slumped. You can see this was Jerry's idea to put a leaf on her lap where it fell off the tree. But you can see that this darker colored glass here is really beautiful. I just love it, and I particularly love it because Jerry paid for it. I think it was $150 for a half sheet of that. It's really expensive glass. It actually has gold in it.
You used to say that about Orion too, as I remember. You loved that because she bought that for you.
Jerry's the kind of wife that every man should have. So, let me show you the detail here. This one I hoped would work, and it really did. Look at the way that her foot is revealed through the holes in the fabric. I thought that came out really cool. So I signed this in 2019, thinking I would finish it in 2019, but it took until well into 2020 before I actually got it done. So.
Douglas, do you want to take some questions?
I certainly will.
Does
I
anyone
thought
have
I
questions?
was.
When are you delivering it to my house?
After, well, I can't tell you when I'm dying, so we'll have to see about that.
Let's hope no time soon.
Hold up. You can't just claim that on live Zoom stream. You don't get to claim it, Aunt Furiel.
Okay, we have sibling issues. here.
Sibling issues here, yes.
What if
Maybe
I
I'll-
want it?
Who's that?
Beth.
Oh, we have
Ah.
sibling issues.
Yep, I don't know. This may be a problem I'll leave for the next generation to sort out.
Lynette, did you have a question?
Yeah, I seem to be obsessed with time at the moment. How long did the whole thing take you?
A bit over 3 years. Did you hear that, Lynette? It was a little over 3 years.
Yeah, that is a big project. My hat's off to you.
Well, thank you. Yes, I really did enjoy it.
Hey, Doug,
Yes.
it's absolutely priceless. It's gorgeous. I had no idea you were so talented.
Oh, thank you, Judy. That
Yeah.
means a lot. I mean, you're so talented yourself. I'm amazed that with your
It's-
compliment.
it does. It fits right in with all your experience. So, as a welder and fabricator, you think this way.
Mhm.
Well, it's true. I enjoy the engineering aspects of artwork. And let me mention something because Jeff is online. He's a friend of ours from Panama. We met down there living on boats, and Jeff, you probably noticed that I had to include a sailboat. That's Un Mundo there that's sailing off into the distance.
Oh
Yes,
my God.
we recognized her.
Thank you for including a sailboat. Yes.
We knew when we met you in that bar in Panama that, or in the San Blas? No, Panama. We were still in Panama. That following you to Colombia would be one of the smartest things we ever done.
Well, it was the beginning of a long-term friendship, all right.
Yes.
Douglas?
That means I should be in the running for this beautiful piece of art.
Forget the siblings.
Yeah,
the siblings.
The siblings, I don't know.
Let me
Hey,
put the
Douglas?
camera down again here. Just one moment. Yes, Stan.
So I'm so impressed. I can't believe it. I had no idea you had such talent. And, you know, I'm wondering if all of those years on the boat, you know, flushing mud out of your air conditioning system, it was where you got your skills to create such a thing.
I did miss having the ability to do real artwork on the boat. But, you know, as you know very well, having a boat like that is a full-time job. There's no time for frivolity.
And then some.
Yes. Yes, for those who don't know him, Stan is a former, he's a recovering Nordhaven owner, as we are.
Yeah. It's kind of nice to work on something other than diesel engines and broken bolts and things.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoy having both the time and the money and the shop to be able to do this kind of work.
Beautiful job, and I'm really envious of your shop.
Well, you have to come visit sometime soon.
I hope to. They
So
ever let
Doug?
me out of my house.
Any
Doug?
other questions? Yes.
Doug, back in the horizon line on the ocean front and the sailboat with the sun, I guess, setting, I can't quite tell if that's all open and we're looking at the sheet, which I think is what was
I got it.
happening.
Yes, yes, it is.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, Jerry will. Can you
Yes.
see? Yeah, it's an open piece,
That's
but
very
it's
nice.
designed to hang. We're going to hang it off the wall, not touching the wall, but a few inches away. And
Uh-huh,
one reason
yeah.
for that is because I don't know if you can really see it here, but the star. This is a Swarovski star, and the shadow of it on the wall behind adds another nice element to the art.
Yeah.
Very good.
And some of the flowers are glass, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, I made those very much like this piece that they're very much like this piece.
Yeah.
The small. Yes,
Right.
it's one of those things that just came to me. I was standing at my glass shop and I had a bunch of scraps and I just thought, I bet I could make a flower out of this. I was actually doing it for a friend of mine that wanted to see something about copper foil, and so I made one, and I thought, that could go in this piece. So,
It adds a lot. I mean, all of it is so dimensional. It's really cool.
well, thank you. I really had fun with it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, that goes to your blow.
It's not a complete circle.
Yes.
Well, I can see where Julie gets some of her artistic talent, Douglas. That she works with this kind of stuff and, paper and nice.
That's
Oh, yeah,
something-
I don't have a question. I just have gratitude for having this nice experience this morning. It's beautiful to see this art and to see everybody. That's what I want to say. Thanks a lot.
2 thumbs up.
Yes. Cheers to that. Yes.
Thank you.
Same for me.
One thing I'd like to say before we end is I had hoped as part of the studio tour to go visit other people's studios and learn techniques from the others around the area. So let me start by inviting all of you to come visit my studio as soon as it's safe to do so again. And if I can come to other studios, I would greatly appreciate it because it would be fun to see how you do it, and it'll inspire me to do new things.
All right. Well, again, I will try to leave you, anyone who wants to stay in here, but I do just want to get a nice applause for Douglas and Jerry. Camera woman work.
This is a great thing you're doing for the community. I appreciate being a part of it.
Thank you so much for being part of it, and thank you all for being a part of it and attending, and look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.